Audrey's favorite content, Audrey's favorite books, content. It's like a Daisy Jones situation. This deep dive into dark and messed upness. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. By sort of the very witch. Because Geneva and watch until, that's not what I want to say. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse and welcome to my favorites of 2023 content. So multiple videos because there were a lot of books to talk about and I maybe totally completely am splitting them into a couple of categories, which means there's more books for me to talk about. So today we are going to talk about my favorite audiobooks of 2023. So I'm really trying hard and I'm just looking at my list. I definitely think there will be a little crossover, minimal crossover in some of my favorite lists, but there's something so, for me, uniquely different about listening to a book versus reading a book in terms of my experience, often in terms of my enjoyment, often in terms of my connection to the story. And as someone who did not really delve into the audiobook world at all until a few years ago, and who very slowly dipped a toe or two into the pool, I have wholeheartedly embraced with both my arms all of the audiobooks that are out there. And I just love when a book is done great, what that can do to your reading experience. Whether it, like I said, it elevates it, it changes how it impacts me, it helps me understand the characters, it helps me understand how to pronounce certain things, but I have just definitely leaned into it and loved them, and they have upped my reading and enriched words, my reading, and I have to rave about some of these. So, in no particular order other than as things popped to mind and then I went through the list of what I read this year, let's start off. So the first book I have is #CrimeTime. This is by Geneva Rose and her husband Drew Pine. This is the only book on my list which was actually conceived of as an audio original. So the only way you can read this book is by listening to it, and it has a full cast of characters, which there are full cast of narrators to read the full cast of characters. So we have Abelardo Campuzano, Jennifer Damanio, Phil Thorne, Gary Tiedemann, Peter Burkrot, PJ Oakland, Nancy Linari, Chris Andrew, Sayula, Piper Goodeve, Kevin R. Free, and Samantha Desz. So I really stumbled there. This is such a fun book, and it is like comedy but crime. And if you have ever followed or watched Drew and Geneva on her Instagram channel, their chemistry, their vibe is just all over this book, which makes a ton of sense. So this takes place in Chicago. This is about Nadia and her half-brother Chase, and they wind up witnessing a burglary in the apartment upstairs from them. And Nadia is a writer. She writes under a pen name. She lives a super private life. Chase is an aspiring TikToker, and he lives his entire life online. So he winds up videotaping the step-by-step as they witness the crime. They go to investigate the crime. They call the police. He uploads everything. It winds up going viral in the worst possible way because now they have some people who are out for them. So this is definitely like sibling energy, hijinks, comedy, some like, I would say kind of like in a Finley Donovan kind of a way. So you get some like dark side of crime, but with some fun to it, and their dog Winston, and it's just a really good time. Be sure to listen to the very, very end because Geneva and Drew talk about the real life event that inspired this book and where fiction deviates from fact. I had to think about that for half a second. So anyway, loved it, tremendous, such a good time, highly recommend it, as if you can't tell. Okay. The next book I have is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. This was read by Adam Lazarre-White. He has read all of S.A. Cosby's books in addition to a whole bunch of other ones. And when I tell you, his narration brought such an elevated level of emotion to this story, of impact to this story, I couldn't stop listening. His voice is beautiful to listen to. S.A. Cosby's writing is beautiful to read and listen to. And he writes very dark, somewhat violent, very weighty books, but there is something about Adam Lazarre-White's audiobook narration that brings such beauty to the beautiful words that S.A. Cosby has written. So I read Razorblade Tears last year, which I absolutely loved. This book is less violent on the page, though still extremely dark. And we are following the first Black sheriff in this small town. And he has a long history with this town. There is a lot of conflict within this town. And when the book opens, there is a shooting that takes place. And as a result of this crime, they wind up unearthing what appears to be a serial killer in their town. There's so much to this book, so many dark turns, but there is such strong, powerful emotion to this. There is a great father-son relationship in this, which is also something he explores in Razorblade Tears from the father's perspectives. And I just can't rave about this book enough. So I had the chance to listen to this from Libro FM as an ALC. I have since purchased the physical copy of the book because not only is it stunningly beautiful on the outside, it is tremendous on the inside, and there is just such poetry to his writing. So what I will say, if Razorblade Tears was understandably too much for you in terms of the violence and the language, there is less on-page violence in this, though there still is some depiction of it sort of after the fact because it's a police investigation. So I would highly recommend it. I am going to continue to work my way through S.A. Cosby's backlist. I do have Blacktop Wasteland, and I'm excited to listen to more of them. But such an outstanding, just like blew me away. Absolutely amazing. Okay, the next book I have is The Last Party. This is by Claire McIntosh, and our audiobook narrator is Chloe Angharad Davies. I definitely feel like I am not great with pronunciation here. So this was the first book I read of 2023, and it takes place on a New Year's Eve party, and then on New Year's Day, a body is found floating in the water, and I intentionally wanted to read it then because of the connection to New Year's. And I have read other Claire McIntosh books, which I totally enjoyed. But this one felt a little bit different to me. I have not read all of her books, but still. This is police investigation. So this body is found in the water, and it's on the border between Wales and England. And it becomes a question of like, who owns the body? So we get a police officer from each jurisdiction trying to solve the crime. And they are, of course, polar opposites. There is a lot of great chemistry between them. There's a lot of great banter between them. There was some humor to this, which I don't feel I have found in other Claire McIntosh books. There's great police investigation. So the setup for this is this body of water separates this very small town from this new development of condos built by sort of the very rich and bougie. And it is their holiday getaway, and they've had this extraordinary New Year's Eve extravaganza for all of the neighbors, and then the host, this guy Reese, is found dead in the water the next day. So we get the small town versus sort of the big fish. We get, like I said, that great humor and banter between the two different police officers. This is the first in a series. So Fionn Morgan is our main DCI. I did get the second book in the series, which I haven't read yet, but I will. I had to get it early from the UK so I could read it early, and I haven't read it yet, but that's a story for a different video. But I wound up doing a mix of reading and listening to this book because I was so into it. And because half of this book is about this village in Wales, I will say the audiobook narration was so helpful on understanding how to pronounce the words, because there's so many words that like look a certain way, but don't sound that certain way. So I had a great time with it. And again, just the inflection to the voices, all of it just was so enhanced by the audiobook narration. And I absolutely loved this book. So highly recommend it. And then I have two books by Rachel Hawkins because I just went sort of not back to back, but in a little bit of a bingey Rachel Hawkins mode. So I read The Villa and I read Reckless Girls. So Reckless Girls was narrated by Julia Whelan, Kimberly M. Wetherell, and Shiromi Arserio. And then Reckless Girls was read by Barrie Kreinek. As always, all of this will be down below for everybody. So two totally different books, no connection at all, but since they were both Rachel Hawkins, I thought I would just bundle them together. So The Villa is basically, we get multiple timelines, and there is this villa in Italy, which is kind of a murder house because back in the 70s, this famous rock star was murdered there. And his girlfriend at the time, girlfriend, wife, girlfriend, I want to say girlfriend, wound up writing sort of this infamous Gothic novel that I would say some questions. It's sort of loosely based on when Mary Shelley went to this villa and wrote Frankenstein. There's like echoes of that. And we get these musicians that are there and this weird murder situation that kind of was solved, but has always sort of been very urban legendy. And then in present day, we have Chase. We have another Chase. We have Chase and Emily. So they were best of friends as kids. They are both writers. There's been a little bit of a rival with them. Emily is not quite struggling. She writes cozy mysteries. She's not exactly like bestseller list situation, whereas Chase is like over the top and exploded and rich and doing fabulous. So Chase invites Emily to spend the summer at this villa for kind of a writing getaway and a writing retreat, and for the two of them to reconnect. So we get the multiple timelines, we get things that are going on in each story, and Emily winds up sort of investigating and being inspired by what happened in the murder house back in the 70s, and toxic female friendship, very bingeable, a lot of fun. I had a great time with it, so I highly recommend that. And then in Reckless Girls, which is so deliciously dark and messed up, and I absolutely loved everything about it because of course I did. We have a girl named Lux and her boyfriend Nico, and they are hired to sail these two girls who have been backpacking all around Europe to this island in the South Pacific. And they are looking for like something off the beaten path. They want adventure. Like I said, they've been backpacking around Europe. They don't want to do the typical things. So Nico and Lux wind up bringing them to this island. And when they get there, there's another couple who are also there. And this island has some legacy and some mystery, and some of it's very dark. And the six of them get up to some stuff, and some dark and messed up stuff happens. So again, very much enjoyed it, very bingeable. I read that, I want to say in the winter when it was like nice and cold here, and they were all like sunning on their boats and on the beach and in their bathing suits, and it was nice and warm. And I just love Rachel Hawkins' dark humor, dark twists and turns. Again, these complex, complicated, toxic relationships that she develops between people, and I have a great time with it. So cheers to Rachel Hawkins, big time, big time, big time. And I'm very excited for her new one, The Heiress, which I do have an arc of, which I'm going to be reading on the sooner side. So teaser for 2024, stay tuned. The next book is Flying Solo by Linda Holmes. This is my second Linda Holmes book, and this is another Julia Whelan audiobook, and I absolutely adored everything about this book. And like fantastic main character, tremendous humor. Again, I think Julia Whelan's audiobook narration, I mean, she's definitely like one of the best, adds so much to it with the inflection, with the twist of phrase, like just all of it. So in this one, we are following a woman named Lori, and she's returned to her hometown in Maine because her great aunt Dot, who is one of her most beloved family members, has passed away. And Lori and Dot were very close when she was alive, and Lori has kind of been tasked by default by her family to be the one to clean up Dot's house and go through all of her stuff. So we have her doing this sort of reluctant return home in some ways. Lori was supposed to be getting married. She wound up calling off her wedding, so you've got that whole situation going on one hand. And we get to see her reuniting with childhood friends and with this community that she was brought up in. And as she's going through Dot's things, finding elements of Dot's past and little mysteries about her. So there is this storyline, which is like a little bit of, again, kind of like a hijinks. She's trying to like auction everything off in the house and have people come in and donate things and do like estate sales and that kind of a thing with all of Dot's stuff. Because Dot was like a world traveler and a collector, and her house is just full of like everything and anything about her. So there is like this wooden duck situation, which sounds really weird, and it kind of is, but you just kind of roll with it, which creates for like this fun storyline, like I said, sort of hijinks thread that goes through it. But for me, the core of the story was about Lori and her connections and her relationships. And I want to say she's 40 or on the cusp of 40. And so much of this book is about creating the life you love, creating the life on your terms. You don't have to be these things that people think you need to be, whether it is married or having children or owning a house or like being in a certain place by a certain age at a certain time in your life. And it's about making your life what you want it to be, that's going to make you happy. And there's such like strength but vulnerability to Lori, and I just love the connections with her friend group, and again with the hijinks that go on in this. So it was such a, and I like hate the phrase like a feel-good book, but I was so emotionally invested in this. I loved everything about it. And I read Linda Holmes' first book. I don't know why I just blank on stuff. Evie Drake Starts Over. So there is just one Easter egg. This takes place in the same town as Evie Drake does. So you do get one Easter egg, which I just love for anyone who read Evie. And if you haven't read Evie Drake, I'm just going to back up and recommend that one, which I read, I want to say 2 years ago. I read that and I thought it was absolutely amazing. So I actually read Evie Drake, but Julia Whelan also narrates that one in case that's an incentive for anyone. But anyway, Flying Solo was absolutely fantastic and I can't wait to see what Linda Holmes does next. Okay, the next book I have is You Love Me by Carolyn Kempness, and this was read by Santino Fontana. So he has done all of her audiobook narrations on top of like a tremendous amount of other things. Like he is a Broadway actor, he's a Tony Award winner, he's been in movies, he's been in TV shows, like he has done it all. And this is the third book in the Joe Goldberg series. This is the first one I have done on audiobook, and I loved it. I love me some Joe Goldberg, you guys know that. And I don't want to talk too much about plot because it really, I feel like all you need to know is Joe is now in the Pacific Northwest doing stuff is basically what you need to know about this. But I already had in my head, so I picked up You, book number 1, because when the TV show was announced, the original one on Lifetime, which has since gone to Netflix, but like originally it was on Lifetime, I was totally intrigued by the show. I was totally intrigued by Penn Badgley being in it. And then I found out, oh my gosh, this is based on a book, because apparently I was living under a rock. So I wound up reading the series with Penn Badgley in my head. And then when the show came out, with his voice absolutely being Joe, and he is so freaking good at being Joe. And then it's so weird because I almost feel like Santino Fontana kind of sounds like Penn Badgley. And maybe that's me just projecting. I don't even know. But I very much enjoyed this book. I very much enjoy what she's doing with the storyline. I wound up reading the 4th book in the series physically this year as well. And he just does such a fantastic job, to the point that like I would like to go back to the beginning of the series and just listen to all of them on audiobook as a reread, kind of maybe. And the books are super dark and messed up. So if I'm like, as a palate cleanser, like, what does it say about me that You is my palate cleanser? But still, he just is so absolutely tremendous. I can't recommend him enough, and I can't recommend these books enough. So very, very fun time with this. I very much enjoyed Joe's continuing adventures into darkness, and I highly recommend it. Okay, next up, I did a reread of The Night Swim by Megan Golden. So I wanted to reread this book before her new book, Dark Corners, came out, because we are following the same true crime podcaster. So the first time I read The Night Swim, I physically read it. I had heard such great things about the audiobook, and because we do get a true crime podcast woven within, it's really, really well done. So this is read by Bailey Carr, January LaVoy, who's fantastic. She shows up a couple times, and Samantha Desz, who we already talked about in a different book, who helped narrate Crime Time. So this book has 2 different points of view, 2 different timelines, and then I said like the podcast in between. So in The Night Swim, she is, I want to say she's like on season 3 of her podcast, and she is investigating. There is a sexual assault trial that is about to launch in this small town, and she is going to cover it. It is reminiscent of the Chanel Miller Brock Turner trial. And the town is very up in arms. The town is very divided. We have this Olympian type swimmer who has been accused of sexually assaulting a girl in high school, and nobody can believe it. And oh my God, his career, and what about him, and what about him? And meanwhile, you have this girl who is the victim of this assault, and a lot of people are not overly concerned about her. So Rachel, who is our true crime podcaster, has come in to cover the case. But while she is there, she winds up getting a note, literally on her windshield, from someone asking her to investigate a case from 20 years ago. And Rachel being Rachel, her interest is piqued, and we start to follow that as well. So this book was, like I said, so well done. I loved it when I physically read it. I really enjoyed it on the audio. I definitely think the podcast narration brings it up, which any podcast book on audio is always fantastic. And I really, really loved this book. So what I will say is you don't have to read this before you read Dark Corners. She will reference the case because Dark Corners basically takes place like a week after the night swim ends. And she will reference that she had been covering this case, but there are no spoilers to it. I would hugely recommend, if you have not already read The Night Swim, that you read it. Of the two, The Night Swim was definitely my favorite of the two. I really enjoy Rachel as a character, and I hope we get to see more of her. There's obviously a door wide open as a true crime podcaster, getting involved in cases. So anyway, I'm really glad I did the reread, and I'm glad I did it on the audio because it was just great. So great. And then another one that I read pretty recently is The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose, and this was narrated by Lauren Ambrose. She absolutely gave such voice to Molly the maid, and it's like I fell in love with her even more. So I read The Maid, the first book, earlier this year, physically read it. And again, I had Libro FM ALC of The Mystery Guest, and I was happy to get my hands on it a little bit early. So in this one, the story of Molly from book number 1 continues. Again, I'm going to be a little bit vague on plot, but it's a cozy mystery, but there are some darker themes to it, but it's not like S.A. Cosby kind of dark, violent on the page, but it's not completely cozy, because she does have a little bit of dark subject matter in here. But in book number 1, Molly winds up finding a guest at the hotel murdered, and she becomes a suspect, and the catalyst of that is her trying to clear her own name. In book number 2, we have a guest who is a world famous mystery writer who is doing an event at the hotel and about to make a huge announcement, and then he drops dead. So we get another investigation trying to find out what happened. But in the second book, in The Mystery Guest, we also get a great past timeline, which does have connections to events that are happening in the present, but we also get to see Molly and her grandma. And I loved those chapters so very much. I loved their relationship. We see Molly, I want to say she's like 10 or 11, and her grandmother raised her, and we get to see sort of like the origin story for Molly in a lot of ways. And there's such warmth and love to those chapters. I definitely cried when I was listening to this book. And the dynamic between them is just so beautiful. And it's just, there's such a heartwarmingness in a book that does, like I said, have a little bit of darkness to it, but there's also some great hijinks and levity at the same time. So I'm a big fan of this series, if you can't tell. And I really enjoyed the audiobook narration of it. So I will continue to keep an eye out for ones that Lauren Ambrose does. She is such a fantastic actress as well. And I just very excited to see, listen, hear her do this book. Okay. Next up, I have One Italian Summer by one of my most favorite people. So Rebecca Searle wrote the book. Lauren Graham narrated the book. I am such a Lorelai Gilmore fan. I don't even have the words for it. And I am such a Lauren Graham fan. I don't want to say I don't know if I would have loved this book as much if I had just read it, but what Lauren Graham brought to this book to me was such powerful emotion. So this is, if you haven't read a Rebecca Searle book, she does like to play with magical realism. And in this book, our main character, her mom has just passed away, and the two of them were supposed to take a trip to Italy together. So her mom was sick, and they were not able to take this trip together. But when her mom was 18, 19, 20, like college age, she spent a summer in Italy, and it was like one of the best times of her life, is what she's told her daughter. So she winds up going on the trip alone, trying to grieve, trying to honor her mom. And when she gets there, she winds up meeting the younger version of her mother. And it is such, I just got the chills even talking about it. It's such a beautiful story. And the idea to me of getting to spend a summer with my younger mother, and I just loved everything about it. It's like that subtle shift of magical realism. So it's not like, there's not like dragons flying in the air or any of this other kind of stuff, but it's just like this subtle shift where she's sort of in the real world, but sort of entered a portal almost, I would say. But Lauren Graham brings such impactful emotion to this story. Did I already say I cried in this one too? I totally cried in this one. I loved it. And I know Rebecca Searle has a book coming out in 2024, which she said is finally like the romance that everybody's been waiting for. So her books have been pitched as love stories, but she does the love story between two best friends, like a platonic female friendship best friend love story, the love story of a mother and a daughter. So I love what she does. I am not mad about it. I am fine calling them love stories because I think there is such unique love between friendships, between parents and children, and then obviously romantic love as well. So I'm excited for her next book, but I just loved everything about this book. I thought it was so beautiful. And my gosh, why is Lauren Graham not narrating more books? She needs to. She needs to. It was so great. It was so great. And then the last book I have is The Celebrants, and this is by Stephen Rowley. So he wrote the book and he did the audiobook narration of it, which is very much like listening to a nonfiction book by the author, like elevates, because we are hearing the book the way it was meant to be read, in my opinion. Marian Keyes did this with Rachel's Holiday, and not only is this book beautiful, and spoiler alert, I cried again. There's such humor to it, which I think he could bring in a way that not that I wouldn't have picked up on it by reading it, or not that a different audiobook narrator wouldn't have had the same impact, but as someone who is writing a book, and there are moments whether they are funny to me or, you know, tense or harsh or like whatever they are, I think how I hear it in my head might not be how somebody else reads it. So to be able to hear it literally out of the author's mouth, I think just brought it up a level. But in this book, it is about 6 best friends from college, and they have made a pact to give each other living funerals, basically during the lowest times of their life, to remind them that they are loved. So they met at Berkeley, and not long before graduation, and this is kind of like where the book opens, one of the friends in the group has unexpectedly passed away, and they have to go to his funeral. And this is where they hatch this plan that there was so much left unsaid. There was so much love for this person that they never got to express, that they didn't want anyone else in the group to sort of leave this world not knowing how loved they were by each other. And we get to see them from this early age in college, when the first one of them has passed away, up until their 50s, which is the present day where we are. And then we flash back to each person's living funeral. So we get to catch up with them at different points in their life. We get to see how their relationships evolve. We get to see the natural, you know, things that happen in a relationship with a group of friends. And it was so beautiful. And I think so much of it I just connected with, where I think about like my friends from college and losing touch with people, and recently have lost some people from high school and unexpected ways, and people I haven't talked to in a long time. And to just know that, like, if you had had an opportunity to tell that person, it just puts so much in perspective, I think. And he was inspired. He was watching The Big Chill, which talk about putting stuff in perspective and be like levity for a moment. That book is supposed to be about like middle age and all of this other stuff. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie or not, but apparently they're all like 35 in that movie, which, like, that's not middle age. I mean, oh my gosh. I was watching something else that has nothing to do with this book, but about how, like, Alice from the Brady Bunch, I don't know if she was like 38 or something, and like, why did I figured she was like 60. I don't know. Like, just how age has changed, but, or like, you know what I mean. So anyway, we get to follow this fantastic group of friends, and they are in California, and they are in New York City, and they go on a destination funeral, and it's just such a beautiful story and such a beautiful sentiment. And there is also fantastic humor woven in between this, in a way that you only have with these people that you've known for all of these years, and these people who have known you for all of these years. So I love seeing the evolution of the relationships, but still, you know, people look at you as the person they knew when they were 18, but also accepting you for who you have now become now that you're 48 or 38 or 28, like whenever they're kind of regrouping in the book. So anyway, that was a lot. I needed to take a breath. So he wrote The Guncle, which I feel like he's like super famous for, which I haven't read yet, but back here somewhere. And he has a sequel to The Guncle coming out this coming year, which I definitely want to read. So I want to read The Guncle first. That's a whole other video of reading plans I have. But anyway, it was such a great book, whether you read it or listen to it, but I highly recommend listening to it. And I just thought it was fantastic. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So what better note to end this video on? Hi everybody, in case it wasn't obvious, future Audrey here. I needed to jump on and add The Idea of You by Robinne Lee to this list of best audiobooks. So there's a reason I usually don't film my year-end content until I've actually finished reading for the year, which I allow myself to do until December 31st. And obviously I filmed this video before I listened to this book. Oh my God, I cannot stop talking about this book. Robinne Lee herself read it. She is an actor, she is a producer, she is a writer. She is an amazing audiobook narrator. You guys know there's just something about the person who wrote the book reading the book that is absolutely fantastic. And when that person is an absolutely fantastic, well-skilled audiobook narrator, off the charts. So this is romance, this is emotion, this is what it means to be a woman, especially a woman of a certain age, about rediscovering yourself, about reclaiming yourself, about living your life on your own terms. And I am obsessed. I get it. I get the hype. This book came out in 2017. I put it on my radar in 2020, the year of, when Taylor Jenkins Reid was raving about it. I don't know if it went TikTok viral or if it just went viral because everybody was craving just something just amazing, but this book definitely had a second life. And I obviously did not read it until 2023 because me, but this book is so flippin' good. So this is about a woman named Selene. She is a 39-year-old woman. She is a mother of a teenage daughter. She is divorced. And long story short, she winds up having to take her daughter and all of her daughter's best friends to a boy band concert for this band called August Moon. So her ex-husband got the tickets. He couldn't take them. She has to fly to Vegas with these teenage girls. And she winds up meeting one of the boys in the band named Hayes, who is definitely a Harry Styles meets Prince Harry, meets some people from Robinne Lee's past, but definitely got Harry Styles vibes going on here. And the tagline on this is, what if your teenager's fantasy was your reality? So not immediately, but eventually, Selene and Hayes get together and it starts as lunch and it goes so much more beyond that. But on top of the romance, there is this incredible story about the invisibility of women, especially as they start to grow older, and perceived invisibility and feelings of it and how you are treated differently as you start to grow older. And there's such incredible story to this. There's such incredible emotion to this. There is levity to this. The bedroom door is kicked so far open. So if that is not your thing, just do not read this book. But if it is your thing or you are a little bit interested, I couldn't recommend it more. And obviously the audiobook is fantastic, which is why we're here. So Hayes is, I'm struggling not to call him Harry. Hayes is British, so she gives him the British accent. All of the other members in the band are British. And Selene is from a French background, so we have some bilingual French speaking going on in here. We have just different turns of phrases. They are traveling all over the world. And I just think the narration is so beautifully well done. And it just added so much to the book, I think. So I have no doubt that you could read this and love every bit of it. But there was some degree of elevation, I think, to all of the scenes by listening to the audiobook of this. And I'm just completely obsessed. Completely obsessed, in case you couldn't tell. So anyway, had to pop on and scream about it. And I absolutely recommend this one because of the story and because of the audiobook narration. So go, 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 go. Those are my books that are my favorite audiobooks of the year. Just so great. And I continue to gobble them up. And I listen to so many more than this. And it's not that the other ones weren't good. These just happen to be my favorite. So let me know, what audiobooks would you recommend to the group? Who maybe are your favorite audiobook narrators? Like January LaVoy is someone I've come across a bunch of times. Barrie Kreinek, Julia Whelan. I kind of want to seek out some more Santino Fontana. Adam Lazarre-White, again, he's done way more than just the S.A. Cosby books, but man, can that can that man just like elevate those books so much. So I'm super excited that I have finally, it's been a couple of years, just broken open into the audiobook land, because it's just a fantastic way to consume books while you're out for a walk, while you're doing your chores, while you're just hanging out at home, whatever it is. But I just love them so much. So anyway, let me know your favorite audiobooks or maybe your favorite audiobook narrators, and we will have all of that chat down below. So I'll be back with more best of 2023s on top of other videos. And until then, take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody. I don't know why I made that weird noise. Bye.